Inside Utah Politics.
Time now for a preview of the Utah Democratic Party State Organizing Convention. For that, we welcome UDP Executive Director Tom DeSirant to the show. Tom, great to have you back on the show. Thanks so much for being here.
No, thanks for having me.
Before we get into the convention, it kicks off a week from Saturday. Get into the state of the Democratic Party. Tell us where you stand at this moment in time.
You know, I think for the Utah Democratic Party, we are really focusing on 2024. We've got a lot of important races that we're going to be preparing for. Then we also really want to go spend the next few months training and recruiting, and that's kind of the big, our big message. This year, the theme of the convention is building for lasting change, and that's what we're doing.
Okay, I want to dig into 2024 a little bit more, but let's get into the convention first. It's in Cedar City. Why Cedar City? Why are you taking it on the road?
Yeah, you know, the party, the state party for at least the last 10, 15 years has been pretty heavily focused on the Wasatch Front, and we need to be more of a state party. There's a lot of great things to do in Cedar. The city itself is beautiful. It's really starting to grow up, and we're seeing a lot more people move down there. The college, Cedar or Southern Utah University, is a great campus, and there's a lot of nature there too. So, you know, we know that we've got Democrats in every corner of the state. We want to make sure that we're giving them some time and some focus and attention.
A big portion of the population, you'd have to say, is centered along the Wasatch Front. How do you think delegates will travel when it comes to driving a couple hours to get to convention?
You know, delegates in Southwest Utah and Cache and Southeast Utah regularly drive up every single year for our convention. I think that most delegates are going to be able to drive down for a day. We also do have a virtual option for everyone. One of the silver linings of COVID is that it's made virtual and hybrid meetings a lot more accessible, and we want to make sure that we are accessible for every single Utah Democrat.
So walk us through, I believe the convention's obviously on Saturday, the 20th, but are there events happening on the 19th as well?
Yep.
Talk about what those are.
Starting at 2 p.m., we've got, on Friday the 19th, we've got some trainings that we're doing where we have some in-state trainers and some people from out-of-state coming in. And then at 7 in the evening, we have just a small little reception for delegates who'd like to attend. Tickets are available at utahdemocrats.org. It's Saturday. We'll start around 10:30, I want to say, and we'll start going through the normal convention procedures then.
So you're not going to be nominating candidates this time around. So talk about what the agenda will look like as far as party business.
Yep. Party business this year is going to be about party leadership, really. We don't have any bylaw amendments. We don't have any constitutional amendments. This year is really going to be focused on building up for 2024. So I think that delegates will vote on the party leaders they think can best help us win next year.
Okay, so there are a couple uncontested races for party leadership, but there are 2 contested races. One of those is Chair Diane Lewis. She's going for the job again. She took it over halfway through the term for Jeff Merchant last time, but she's going up against Jacob Lawson there. What are you hearing from the party? I know you can't say who you think is going to win or give us any hint like that, but is there some excitement generated around this race?
You're right, I can't speak too much to it just because I have to administer the race. You know, I can say that I think that delegates are really weighing their options and looking for leadership who's going to do a good job next year. I think that a lot of delegates are reaching out to both candidates. They're talking to them and seeing who they really think is going to be a strong leader for 2024. 2024 is a big year. We've got
no doubt.
a lot of races, and we've got the presidential re-elect.
Presidential year, yep. At vice chair, there's also some competition there. Oscar Mata is the current vice chair, but Nick Mitchell, a former congressional candidate within the party, and then Daniel Osterstock is lining up for that race as well. You already mentioned, as far as the agenda goes, something we saw during the Republican convention was some votes on resolutions and whatnot. None of that this year. Why is that?
You know, I think that the Republican resolutions were really just culture war things, and that's not where the Democratic Party is, not the Utah Democratic Party and not the National Democratic Party. We saw a lot of resolutions with the Republican Party this year about, 10-year-old legislation with SB 54, or, a resolution about the flag. And, I think that Democrats are much more concerned about the state of our country and the state of our state rather than silly things like a new flag.
We also saw at the Republican convention just recently, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis as a keynote speaker. Anyone big coming in from the Democratic Party this year?
No, that's not really what we do. Occasionally in the past we've had speakers come in, but really the focus of the Utah Democratic Party this year and in the last few years was building for lasting change. That's what our theme is, and that's what we're sticking to.
Okay, so you have some time still preparing. What will be going in these final weeks to get ready to make sure you're able to pull this off successfully?
Yeah, the big thing that the staff is really working on is just making sure that virtual voting is going to go well. We had a good run with it last year with minimal issues, but we want to make sure that no one is disenfranchised. Everyone's able to vote, whether they're attending in person or they're attending remotely. So that's really the next big pull for us.
All right, busy time ahead. Let's get more into 2024 now. Last election cycle, you bypassed a candidate for Senate. What's the feeling within the party? Was that successful, or is the feeling this time around we need to make sure we get a candidate on the ballot?
I think that, so last year the vote was 43 to 57%. And I think that the lines are still kind of there. I think that there are some people who think that it wasn't the right choice. Other people who think that it really was the right call to make. At the end of the day, our highest governing body in the Democratic Party of Utah is the delegates. And we'll have to go see what they say. We respect the democratic process.
There seemed to be a sense, though, that not having a candidate at the top of the ticket may have hurt energy when it comes to Democrats coming out.
Yeah, I definitely know there were a handful of candidates who said they really felt like that happened. One good thing is no matter what happens at our convention next year, we will have an incredibly strong Democrat at the top of the ticket with President Joe Biden.
Let's talk a little bit about the congressional districts. I think one thing we definitely saw in 2022 is that they're more red safe now than they have been. We've at least seen the 4th district competitive for a Democrat. In fact, Representative Ben McAdams won it just a few years ago. It wasn't really that close this time around. So with that in mind, how do you approach recruiting candidates for those positions, and what's the strategy there?
So I'll start by saying I'm very excited about Better Boundaries lawsuit. It's very frustrating to see the Republican supermajority just trample over the will of the people by not respecting the Independent Redistricting Commission. I'll say, when I talk to candidates who are running in difficult and challenging races is, one, it's always important to give people a choice on the ballot. But more than that, running for Congress is an incredible way to build name recognition should you ever run for office again, especially if it's for a lower office, lower on the ballot at least. It's also a really great way to get a stage and to get your issues out there. I'd love it if someone were to come out and run on changing some of the tax issues that we have in the state of Utah. It'd be great if we had someone come out and really use their platform to talk about renters' rights, for example.
Okay, they definitely have the platform when it comes to debates and media coverage and whatnot. Tom, big days ahead of you. Thanks so much for the preview. We really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me on.
You bet. Stay with us. We will be right back with more Inside Utah Politics right after the break.